He hadn't called in almost a year. That alone should have told me something. But when the phone rang that Thursday afternoon and I saw Travis's name flash across the screen, my breath caught for a second. It wasn't joy, not exactly. It wasn't even relief. It was that tight, quiet flutter in the chest you get when someone you once held in your arms suddenly remembers you exist. I stared at the screen for a moment before answering. "Hey, Mom," he said like it hadn't been months. His voice was casual, light. "How've you been?" I didn't know how to answer that. Fine felt like too much. So I just said, "I'm here." He talked about how they'd moved to a quieter town about an hour away. Said they were settling in. Then he cleared his throat and said, "Well, we're having a little get-together this weekend. Nothing big, just a cookout. Thought it might be a good time for you to meet Micah." Micah, my great-grandson. I'd only seen him in pictures, photos his wife posted once in a while. Thick brown hair, sleepy eyes. He was already walking. I'd heard. "You can take the train," Travis said quickly. "The station is just down the road from us. I'll get you a ticket. Just pack a small bag. I'll make sure someone picks you up or gets you settled." I was quiet, not because I didn't want to go, but because I'd spent so long waiting for an invitation that I'd almost stopped expecting one. He kept talking, rushing through his words. "I know I should have called sooner. Work's been nuts. And Micah, he's a handful. But it'd be good to see you. We can catch up. I'll text you the station info. Friday morning train, all right." I said yes. Of course I did. That evening, I pulled out my small travel bag from the hall closet. It still smelled faintly like the cedar blocks I kept with the blankets. I packed slow, not because I was tired, but because it felt important. I folded my softest sweater, the blue one with the worn sleeves. I added a fresh pair of slacks, my white blouse with the gentle collar, and a pair of shoes that were comfortable but still neat. Then I reached into the chest at the foot of my bed and pulled out the baby blanket I'd crocheted the year Micah was born. Soft cream and pale green. I'd worked on it during long evenings, even though no one had asked me to. I wrapped it carefully in tissue paper and placed it on top of the clothes, like a gift to a child who didn't yet know my name. I also slipped in a tiny tin of oatmeal cookies. I didn't know if he liked them, but it felt like something a great-grandmother should do. Then I stood in my kitchen, holding onto the back of the chair, thinking. I hadn't seen Travis face to face in over a year. Not since the day after my sister's funeral, when he left early and barely looked back. There'd been a time when we spoke every Sunday. He used to bring me flowers on Mother's Day, even if they were from the grocery store. He'd sit on my porch, talk about his day, let me make him a plate. Those days felt far away now, but maybe this was a beginning again. Maybe people softened. Maybe the years had made him realize something. I don't think I let myself believe all of that, not fully, but I let the hope settle just a little. Before bed, I laid my coat by the door. The same navy coat I wore to church. Still warm, still clean. I placed my wallet in the front pocket of my purse and checked the time of the train one more time in his text. Departure, 9:45 a.m. That night, I didn't sleep much. I stared at the ceiling and listened to the clock tick. I imagined holding Micah. I wondered if he'd smile or cry. I wondered if Travis would pull me into a hug or offer just a nod. I wondered if his wife would speak to me. I thought about what I might say if he apologized. Then I stopped myself. I wasn't going for closure. I was going for connection. At sunrise, I got dressed slowly. I ran a comb through my hair and pinned it back neatly. I took my time with my makeup, just a little powder, some lip balm. I tied the laces of my shoes tight and double-checked my bag. Before I left, I stood at the kitchen sink, looked out the window, and whispered a quiet prayer, not for things to be perfect, just for them to be kind. I closed the door behind me, locking it out of habit. The air was cool, but not sharp. My cab arrived right on time. The driver was polite, didn't ask questions. I held the blanket on my lap the whole ride. When we pulled up to the station, I thanked him and stepped out. The building looked the same as it had for decades. Brick walls, scuffed windows, old schedule boards that still clicked when the times changed. I felt my phone buzz in my purse. A message from Travis. Ticket should be at the counter. Call if you need anything. I stood a little straighter. Maybe he meant it this time. I walked inside and headed toward the counter. A woman with gray streaks in her bun looked up and gave me a small smile. Name? She asked. Diana Mora, I said. She started typing. I waited, and that's where things began to shift. But at that moment, I still believed this was going to be a good day. I still believed I was wanted. The station was quiet when I arrived. Just a few people scattered around, sipping coffee or staring at their phones. I stood near the entrance for a moment, taking it in. The benches, the big clock on the wall, the soft murmur of announcements. None of it had changed much since the last time I was here. I pulled my little suitcase behind me, stepped up to the ticket counter, and gave the clerk a polite smile. Morning, I said. I should have a ticket waiting. My son said. He reserved it under my name, Diana Mora. The woman typed on her keyboard. Her nails were short and clean, her glasses sliding a bit down her nose. She frowned. I'm sorry, she said, glancing back at the screen. Nothing's coming up under that name. Are you sure it's for today? Yes, I said, nodding. He texted me last night. Said it'd be ready this morning for the 9:45 train. She checked again, slower this time. Her lips pressed into a line. No reservation for Mora. I'm really sorry. I stood there for a second, not angry, just confused. I reached into my purse, thinking maybe there was a printed ticket Travis had slipped in somehow. I dug past my reading glasses, a small bottle of hand lotion, and my folded tissue pack. Near the bottom, tucked beside my wallet, was a plain white envelope. No name, no message. Inside was a single $10 bill. I stared at it. $10. That was it. No instructions. No, just in case. Just that one crumpled bill, like an afterthought. I felt something sink in my chest. I stepped away from the counter, told the clerk, thank you anyway, and found a seat near the far wall. I didn't want to call right away. I just wanted a minute. I sat with my hands in my lap, watching the people come and go. A family with a stroller. A college kid with a backpack covered in pins. A man in work boots tapping his foot while looking at the screen above the ticket counter. I pulled out my phone and opened Travis's message from last night. Ticket should be at the counter. Call if you need anything. I hit dial. It rang once, twice, then went to voicemail. I hung up without leaving a message. I tried again 10 minutes later. Same thing. I sent a short text. Hi, there's no ticket under my name. Can you check? No reply. Another 20 minutes passed. I looked around. No one looked at me. No one even glanced. It hit me slowly. Not like a sudden blow, but like water soaking through a coat you thought was waterproof. I wasn't waiting anymore. I'd been left. Not by accident. On purpose. I shifted in my seat, my back starting to ache. The bench was old and hard. I kept checking the door. I kept hoping maybe there was some mix-up. Maybe he'd call and say, sorry, Mom. Wrong day. Let me fix it. But nothing came. By now, the train had already left. The next one wouldn't come for hours. My stomach was tight. I hadn't eaten since the night before. The oatmeal cookies in my bag felt too sweet, too small to matter. I stared down at my hands resting on my purse. They looked older today, a little more tired. I tried calling one more time. Still no answer. The train station felt colder now. Not from the air, but from the stillness. The idea that my son could send me off like this, without even a warning or a reason, settled somewhere deep. I thought about Micah. I thought about the baby blanket in my bag. I wondered if he'd ever know I made it. After a while, I stood up and stepped outside. The sun had come out, but it wasn't warm. The wind had picked up, tugging gently at the edges of my coat. A man walked by reading a newspaper. A teenager laughed into her phone nearby. Life was moving, but I wasn't. I sat back down inside, closer to the corner this time. The ticket clerk glanced at me once, then turned away. I wasn't a customer anymore, just someone sitting there too long. I reached for my water bottle and took a slow sip. Then I reached for the $10 bill again, as if it might make more sense the second time. It didn't. It felt more like a message than a gift, like he was saying, "Here, this is what I think you're worth." That hurt more than I expected. Not the money, but the meaning. I folded the bill, placed it back in the envelope, and tucked it deep into my bag. I didn't cry. Not there. But something quiet in me began to slip. It wasn't sadness, not yet. Just a heavy stillness. The kind you feel when you realize you've been left out of a story you used to be part of. I stayed there for nearly 2 hours. Long enough to watch 2 more trains come and go. No call. No message. Not even a lie. Just silence. And that was the hardest part. Not the missing ticket. Not even the $10. But how easy it was for him to let me sit there like I didn't matter. Like I wasn't his mother. Like I was no one. And maybe some of you know what that feels like. To wait for someone who never planned on showing up. To feel like you've disappeared while still standing in the middle of the room. If you've ever felt that, really felt it, then you already know. That's where my story truly began. Not with the phone call. Not even with the forgotten ticket, but with the silence that followed. I must have looked like a statue, sitting on that bench. My legs had gone numb, and my back ached from the cold wooden slats. But I didn't move. Not for a long time. People came and went around me. Some glanced in my direction and quickly looked away. One young couple walked by holding hands, laughing about something on their phone. The girl gave me a sideways look, quick but enough to land, like I was taking up space I wasn't supposed to. I shifted slightly, trying to ease the stiffness in my hips. The baby blanket in my bag felt heavier than it had earlier. The $10 bill, crumpled inside its envelope, sat untouched. I thought about standing up and walking to the coffee stand, but I didn't want to spend the money. I didn't want to explain why I was still there. I didn't want pity. I just wanted the day to make sense. That's when I noticed her, an older woman, maybe just a few years younger than me, standing near the door with a scarf wrapped neatly around her neck. She held a small thermos in her hands and a tote bag that looked like it had seen a lot of years. She looked right at me, not past me, not through me, just at me. She walked over slowly, then paused about 2 steps away. "You look like you could use something warm," she said. Her voice was calm, low, like she was used to speaking gently. She unscrewed the lid and poured tea into the little cap. "I run a small bookstore just across the street," she added. "It's nothing fancy, but there's a heater and a soft chair by the window if you need one." I didn't answer right away. I just watched the steam rising from the cup in her hand. She didn't push. She just stood there, waiting like she had all the time in the world. Finally, I nodded. "Thank you," I said, and stood up. The suitcase wheels clacked softly against the sidewalk as we crossed. She adjusted her pace to match mine, without saying anything. The wind was sharper now, but not enough to make us rush. The shop sat between a tailor's place and an old bakery. Faded lettering on the door said Marta's Books. She held the door open for me. Inside, it smelled like paper, cinnamon, and something warm I couldn't quite name. Maybe old floorboards. Maybe peace. The lights were soft. Books lined every wall, some stacked on chairs and side tables. There were mugs for sale near the register, each one a little chipped. "Take any chair you like," she said. I chose one near the front window. It had a patch on one armrest, like someone had stitched it back together with care. She set the cup down on the small table beside me, then moved behind the counter. No questions, no chatter, just space. I leaned back. The cushion gave just enough. It wasn't perfect, but it was warm. The tea was mild, probably chamomile. I held the cup in both hands for the heat, not the taste. For the first time that day, I let myself feel still. Not waiting, not pretending, just still. I watched her move around the shop, rearranging a few books, wiping a bit of dust from a shelf. She didn't look at me, but I could tell she was aware I was there. Not in a nosy way, in a kind way. There was something steady about her, something that didn't ask anything of me. After a while, she walked over with a little dish of crackers. "In case you haven't eaten," she said, and walked away. I didn't argue. I was hungry. I broke one cracker in half and chewed slowly. Everything felt quiet, but not empty. The radio hummed softly in the background. The heater clicked every now and then. A small cat I hadn't noticed before wandered out from under a shelf and curled up near my foot. I reached down and gave it a gentle scratch behind the ear. It didn't flinch. Time passed. I didn't look at the clock. At some point, Marta brought out a folded quilt and laid it over the arm of my chair. "Just in case," she said, and walked away again. No questions. I hadn't told her my name. She hadn't told me hers. It didn't matter. Later, when she brought out a second thermos and poured herself some tea, she sat on a stool near the front counter. "This shop was my husband's idea," she said, not looking directly at me. "He passed a few years back. I kept it going." I nodded. She didn't say more. I didn't need her to. Some stories are better shared slowly. The sun outside had dipped a little lower. The window beside me was fogged around the edges. I felt something loosen in my chest. Not joy, not even comfort, really, just less tight. Marta looked over finally. "You can stay upstairs tonight if you need. There's a small room. It's quiet. No charge." She didn't say it like a favor, more like a simple offer. "All right," I said quietly. "Thank you." I didn't ask why she was being kind. Maybe she'd sat on her own bench once. Maybe she knew what it felt like to be looked at like extra weight. That night, in a small room above a bookshop, with a quilt pulled over my knees and a cat sleeping near the window, I closed my eyes. Not because everything was better, but because something inside me had stopped shaking. I still didn't know why Travis had left me like that, but I knew, for now, I wasn't alone. I stayed at Marta's place for 2 nights. She never asked how long I'd be there, just made extra oatmeal in the mornings and left a clean towel folded on the end of the bed. The quiet helped me think. I didn't talk much, and neither did she. I spent most of the second day sitting near the window downstairs, reading parts of books without really finishing any of them. My mind kept drifting back to the train station, to the silence from Travis, to that envelope with $10. By the third morning, I felt ready to go home, not because anything had been fixed, but because I needed to be in my own space. I needed to look at things with clearer eyes. Marta gave me a soft hug before I left. "Come by any time," she said. "No need to call." I promised I would. The bus ride home was quiet. I sat near the window and watched the streets pass by. The closer I got to my apartment, the more the questions started pressing in. Why had Travis called after so long, only to leave me standing at a train station with no explanation? Why the invitation? Why now? When I stepped inside my apartment, everything looked exactly as I'd left it. Shoes by the door, coffee mug in the sink, blanket folded on the arm of the couch. But something about it felt different now. Heavier. I put the kettle on, but I didn't make tea. Instead, I walked to the hallway closet and pulled out the wooden box that held our old papers. The ones Frank and I had gathered over the years: wills, insurance documents, bank account information, property forms. I sat at the kitchen table and started going through them slowly. About halfway through, I found something I didn't recognize. It was a power of attorney form. Recent. My name printed clearly across the top. And below that, a signature that looked an awful lot like mine. But I hadn't signed anything like that. Not recently. Not ever. I stared at the loops in the D, the way the mora tilted slightly left. It was close, but not right. The line under my name was a little too smooth. That's when it hit me. I remembered a phone call from Travis about 4 months ago. It was on a Sunday evening. He'd asked if I still had my accounts with the same credit union. Said he was just making sure everything was in order, his words. Just in case something happens, he had said. At the time, I didn't think much of it. Families ask questions like that sometimes, especially after someone's been widowed. But looking at this form now, I could see it differently. This wasn't a son checking in. This was a plan. I looked through the rest of the folder, hands steady but my heart sinking. No other surprise papers. No letters. No receipts tucked away. Just this form. Just this one thing that didn't belong. He had tried to take over. Not through a conversation. Not through trust. But through paper. Through forgery. I stood up and walked to the window. The street outside was quiet. A woman walked her dog across the way. I leaned my head against the glass and tried to breathe. This wasn't forgetfulness. It wasn't carelessness. It was a decision. Travis had chosen to paint me as someone slipping, someone who needed help managing her life. But I wasn't slipping. I cooked my meals. I paid my bills. I still remembered every birthday in our family, even the cousins no one talked to anymore. I knew what this was. It wasn't concern. It was control. And now I saw that the invitation to meet Micah had never really been about seeing me. It had been about showing I couldn't handle simple things anymore, that I was disoriented, that I missed the train, that I forgot details. All of it a setup. The $10, that wasn't an oversight. It was a test, a trap. And maybe I was supposed to call someone and panic. Maybe I was supposed to sound confused, like I didn't remember what I'd been told. But I didn't. I sat still. I waited. I saw the truth. Back at the table, I picked up the paper again. My hands didn't shake. I didn't cry. I folded it neatly and placed it into a plain envelope. Then I wrote one word across the front. Copy. I placed the envelope in my drawer next to the others. And I sat there thinking about all the small things I'd ignored. The way Travis had started double-checking my bills last fall when he visited. The way he asked what medications I was on. The way he tilted his head when I told stories, like he was listening more for mistakes than memories. It hadn't been out of love. He was watching me, measuring, trying to find cracks. And now I was sure he'd been getting ready for something. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but soon. Well, now I was ready too. I pulled out my notepad and wrote down the name of Frank's old financial advisor, Mr. Culver. We hadn't spoken since the funeral, but I still remembered his firm voice, the way he read contracts like they were gospel. I picked up the phone and called his office. Hello, the receptionist answered. My name is Diana Mora. I said calmly, I'd like to speak to Mr. Culver regarding a trust and a document I didn't authorize. There was a pause, then she said, "Please hold." When he answered, I didn't waste time. "It's Diana," I said. "I found something I think you need to see." His tone didn't change, but I heard the weight in it. "Come in tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock. Bring everything." I thanked him and hung up. I went to the sink and filled a glass of water. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel sorry for myself. I just felt clear. He thought I wouldn't notice. He thought I'd let it slide. But he forgot who raised him, and now I was going to handle it. The next morning, I dressed neatly, pressed slacks, a gray cardigan, and the small gold earrings Frank gave me years ago. I left the baby blanket folded on the kitchen chair and slipped the envelope with the forged document into my purse. Mr. Culver's office hadn't changed much since the last time I'd been there, still tucked between the old post office and that tiny dental clinic with the chipped sign. The glass door rattled a little when I pulled it open. A woman at the front desk looked up and smiled politely. She didn't recognize me, but that was all right. "I have a 10 o'clock with Mr. Culver," I said. She nodded and asked me to take a seat. I didn't wait long. Mr. Culver stepped out from a side door and motioned me in with a quiet, "Good to see you, Diana." We walked into his office. Wood-paneled walls. A framed photo of his wife and grandkids on the bookshelf. Same old leather chairs with the creak in them. He sat behind his desk and folded his hands. "What can I help with?" I reached into my purse and handed him the envelope. "I found this in my drawer." "I didn't sign it," I said. He took out the paper, scanned it slowly. He didn't react right away, just set it down flat, and pulled out the thick red file with my husband's name written across the tab. He flipped through the pages until he reached the section Frank had finalized before his last hospital stay. I remembered the day Frank signed it. How serious he'd been, how careful. Back then, we thought it was just a precaution. Culver tapped his finger on a highlighted clause. "This paragraph here," he said, "states clearly no transfer of power can occur unless there's written certification of mental incapacity from two separate physicians with your direct consent." He looked up at me. Was there ever such a certification? I shook my head. No, nothing close. He leaned back in his chair. "Then this signature isn't just suspicious. It's fraudulent, and whoever submitted it could be removed from the trust entirely if proven guilty of intent." I didn't ask what that meant for Travis. I just said, "Can we stop it? Before anything else happens?" "Yes," he said without hesitation. "We'll freeze access for now. All disbursements, changes, anything. That includes anything he may have set in motion. I'll open a formal review." Quietly, he made a few notes, then picked up the phone on his desk. His voice turned steady, lower, more official. He didn't say Travis's name, not once. Just numbers, account types, and legal terms. But I knew. By the time he hung up, he looked at me again, softer this time. "You did the right thing coming in. Most people don't act until it's too late." I sat still for a moment, then said, "I don't want revenge. I just want control of my own life." He nodded. "That's exactly what you've done." I stood up, thanked him, and left. The sidewalk outside felt colder than I remembered. I wrapped my coat tighter and kept walking. I didn't cry. I didn't even feel relief yet. But I felt something shift, like I had grabbed the steering wheel again after drifting for too long. I stopped at the credit union next. Same building I'd been using for years, but today I walked to a different desk. A woman named Tanya helped me. She wore a simple pearl pin on her sweater and had the kind of calm voice that made people feel safe. "I'd like to open a new account," I told her, "just in my name, separate from everything else." She asked no questions, just handed me the forms. I filled them out carefully, double-checking every line. It wasn't a secret account, but it was mine. When she handed me the folder with the account details, I slipped it into the same purse where the forged paper had been. It felt like something had been replaced. Something wrong swapped out for something right. Back outside, I took a slow walk around the block, past the old thrift store, the little diner with faded stools in the window. People moved around me, students, workers, parents pushing strollers, but I didn't feel invisible anymore. I was quiet, but not lost. Later that afternoon, back in my apartment, I made a cup of tea and sat at the table. Not because I needed to calm down, but because I wanted to sit in this new stillness. This one wasn't heavy. It was honest. Travis still hadn't called. Not a single message since the day at the train station. But now I wasn't waiting for one. He had made his choice, and I had made mine. I reached for my notepad and jotted down a few simple things to do the next day. Update a few passwords, check on my will, shred the old copies of things I no longer needed. I wasn't rushing. I just wanted my house and my life to reflect the truth again. That I was still here, still clear, still mine. The letter came exactly a week later. Plain envelope, no return address, but I knew it was from Travis before I even opened it. The way my name was typed on the front, centered, bold, like it was business, not personal. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of lukewarm coffee and slid my finger along the edge of the envelope. Inside were 3 pages, typed, neat, too neat. It started with "Dear Mom," but there was no warmth in it, just a list of reasons. He said he'd only meant to protect me, that things had become complicated with the trust, and he thought it would be simpler if he handled things from now on. Said he'd seen me struggle to keep track of things, bills, appointments, dates, and that he'd been worried. Worried. There was no mention of the forged signature, no acknowledgement that I'd been left at a train station without a ticket, just lines about how confusion happens with age. And I thought I was helping. Then, tucked behind the last page, was a copy of a doctor's note. I remembered the visit 2 years ago, routine checkup, a different doctor than usual. He'd asked me if I ever misplaced my keys. I said yes, like anybody does. The note had been altered, the date slightly moved forward. Some words circled in highlighter, minor forgetfulness, recommended monitoring, possible early signs. Nothing that said I couldn't manage my life. Nothing that said I couldn't think clearly, but enough to raise doubt, on paper at least. I sat back in my chair and stared at the letter. Not a single apology, just defense, just a tidy explanation to justify doing something behind my back. He hadn't called me. He'd chosen to write this down, like that made it cleaner. I folded the papers and slid them into the file drawer in the hallway. No tears, just a quiet understanding that whatever trust we had left was sitting behind glass now. Cold, distant. That afternoon, I went for a short walk, just to move my legs. I passed Marta's shop, but didn't go in. The lights were off anyway, probably her day off. When I got home, the voicemail light on my phone was blinking. First message, Travis's wife. Her voice was thin, unsure. She sounded like someone caught in the middle of something she didn't quite agree with, but didn't know how to stop. Hi, Diana. It's Julie. I just wanted to reach out. Travis told me you were upset. I don't know all the details. I know money's been tight, and things got kind of stressful. He didn't mean any harm. I hope you're doing okay. She hung up without saying goodbye. I sat with that for a while. It didn't change anything, but it confirmed what I'd started to suspect. This wasn't just about me. It was about their situation, their choices. And somewhere along the line, I became a part of their plan without being asked. Later that night, another message came through. This time it was Nora, my granddaughter. Her voice was soft, unsure but honest. "Hi, Grandma, it's Nora. I don't really know what's going on. Dad won't talk about it much. He just said you were being difficult, but I don't think that sounds like you. I wanted to say hi. I miss you, and I miss your oatmeal cookies. I hope you're okay." She didn't leave a number, just hung up after a quiet breath. That one got to me, because no matter what Travis believed, no matter what he was trying to prove, I knew who I was to Nora, and she hadn't forgotten. I listened to her message 3 more times that night, not because I needed comfort, but because it reminded me I wasn't erased. Not fully. There was still a thread. I wrote her a card the next morning. Just a simple note. "I'm okay. I love you. I'm proud of you." I didn't say anything about her father. I didn't mention what had happened. I just wrote what I knew mattered most. I mailed it without expecting anything back. Some doors open slowly, and some don't open at all. But at least I'd knocked. That evening, I sat at the kitchen table with the window cracked open. The breeze moved through gently. I lit a small candle and let the room settle. I thought about the letter again and what it meant to be protected in someone else's eyes. Sometimes people decide you need help without asking if you want it. Sometimes they make choices for you to make things easier for themselves. And sometimes they do it in the name of love. But love without respect is just control. I wasn't going to argue with Travis. I wasn't going to write back and explain myself. He already knew what he'd done. Whether he admitted it or not didn't change the truth. I had taken the pen back, quietly, and I wasn't going to give it up again. The following week, I made an appointment with a local attorney, someone newer, younger than Mr. Culver, but kind and clear. I updated my will without fuss. I didn't remove Travis entirely, but I adjusted things. The control was mine again, and I wanted the paper trail to match. I added Nora's name to a section, not for the money, but because I wanted her to know later that I saw her, heard her. I didn't write Travis out of my life. I just took him out of the driver's seat. After that, I sat down and wrote him a letter. Just 1 page. Handwritten. No anger. No guilt. Just facts. I told him I knew about the forged signature. I told him I'd taken the proper steps to protect myself. I told him I was still clear-headed, capable, and not someone to be managed behind her back. I ended with, "You may not agree with the choices I've made, but they are mine to make." That hasn't changed. I didn't ask for a response. I sealed the envelope and walked it down to the blue mailbox on the corner. On the way back, I stopped at the bank and withdrew a small sum. Nothing big, just enough to take care of a few things I'd been putting off. First, I called the building manager. The light in the back stairwell had been flickering for weeks, and the handrail near the laundry room wobbled. I asked him to send someone. Then I offered to cover the cost myself, no strings attached. "It's not a problem," I said. "Just send me the receipt." He sounded surprised, but grateful. Next, I wrote a check to the local literacy center, the same place I used to volunteer at before the pandemic. I hadn't been back since, but the memories were still strong. The quiet afternoons helping seniors learn how to use the library computers. The notebooks filled with short stories written by shaky hands. I dropped the envelope off at the post office with a small smile. It felt good to give quietly again. A few days later, I ran into Marta at the farmer's market. She was leaning over a table of fresh apples, squinting like she couldn't decide which ones were firmest. I tapped her shoulder gently. She turned and smiled. "I've been wondering how you were." "I'm okay," I said. "I've been thinking about something." We found a bench nearby and sat for a while, eating honey sticks and talking. I told her I'd been feeling like I still had something useful to offer. like I wanted to do more than just fix things behind the scenes. She tilted her head thoughtfully and said, "Why not come by next Tuesday afternoon? I've got a small group of folks who meet for writing. It's casual. You'd fit in." I didn't say yes right away, but something about it felt right. The following Tuesday, I showed up with a notepad and a pencil. 6 of us sat in a circle in the back of the bookstore. The oldest was 84. The youngest was 61. We read each other's stories. Nothing fancy, just memories, moments. I didn't say much that first day, just listened, but it lit something in me. By the 3rd week, I'd started sharing too. Small things at first, a story about my first job, a memory of Frank teaching Nora how to ride her bike. Then, slowly, I started writing about the harder parts. Not naming names, just telling the truth through characters who sounded a little like me. And people listened. They nodded. They understood without asking questions. Something about being heard like that, without judgment or pity, started to put me back together. I began to sleep better. I cooked again, not out of habit, but because I wanted to. One afternoon, I baked a batch of lemon muffins. Not for company, just for me. I ate one warm, with butter, while standing by the window. The rest I wrapped in parchment and froze. Then I took a small portion of the money I had left from the withdrawal and walked into a little boutique near the bus stop. They had a rack of winter coats on clearance in the back. I found one. Soft wool, a shade of green the first light. It fit just right, no tugging at the shoulders. I bought it without second guessing. As I walked out of the shop, the wind picked up slightly. I pulled the collar up and smiled to myself. It wasn't about the coat. It was about wearing something I chose. Something I didn't have to explain to anyone. That night, I sat at the table with a fresh cup of tea. I opened my notebook and wrote. Rebuilding doesn't have to be loud. Sometimes it's as small as a new recipe, a warm coat, or the sound of your own story finally being told. I didn't know what would happen next, but I didn't feel afraid of that anymore. I was still living in the same apartment, wearing the same shoes, folding the same towels. But something in me had shifted. Not loud, not sudden, just steady. A few weeks later, I found myself walking near the train station again. Not on purpose. I'd been to the post office, picked up some eggs from the little store around the corner, and just kept walking. My feet carried me past the old benches, past the cracked pavement, past the spot where I'd waited that day with nothing but a suitcase and a $10 bill. I didn't feel angry. Not anymore. I stood for a moment across the street and just looked. A woman sat alone on one of the benches. She had a scarf wrapped around her shoulders and a rolling bag by her feet. Her eyes scanned the parking lot, waiting. I didn't know her story, but I didn't need to. I crossed the street slowly and stopped beside her. "Excuse me," I said gently, holding out a small folded paper. "I just thought you might enjoy this." She blinked, a little surprised, but took it. Inside was a handwritten note, simple, nothing too personal. Just, if today feels heavy, you're not alone. There's still kindness nearby. Marta's bookstore, first cups on me. I had tucked in a coupon Marta had given me for new visitors. The woman nodded once. I smiled and walked away. I didn't need to stay. Some things don't need to be explained. They just need to be offered. That evening, I opened my window before sunset. The air was cool, just a little breeze. Not too sharp, not too still. It felt like peace. The kind you make for yourself, not the kind that's handed to you. I sat at the table and ran my fingers along the edge of the folder, holding all my updated papers, my will, my bank details, the form that proved I still had a say. It didn't feel like a victory. It just felt right. Travis hadn't reached out again. I hadn't expected him to. Maybe one day he would. Maybe not, but I knew something now I hadn't known before. He had tried to write a version of my life that suited him, one where I was fading, where I couldn't manage things, where decisions needed to be made on my behalf. But the thing he forgot, the thing some people always forget, is that being quiet doesn't mean being weak, and being older doesn't mean being blind. He may have tried to erase me from the center of the story, but I never disappeared. I remembered. I saw. I stayed. You don't need a courtroom or a shouting match to prove you still matter. Sometimes it's enough to take a quiet stand in your own living room, to pour your tea the way you like it, to write your thoughts in the margins of a notebook and speak them out loud when you're ready. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is keep going when no one's watching. I looked out the window one more time before closing the curtain for the night, not to shut the world out, but to rest. And maybe someone you love once tried to make you feel like a burden. Maybe you've been left on a bench with only your name, a small bag, and the weight of everything unspoken. If that's you, I hope you remember what I had to learn. You are not someone to be managed. You are someone to be remembered. Your story isn't over just because someone else tried to end a chapter early. And it doesn't matter how small the next step feels. If it's yours, it's enough. If this story reminded you of something real, even just a little, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever been quietly pushed aside, made to doubt your own memory, left wondering where you fit in the story of your own life? Share a quiet heart in the comments. I'll be reading, and so will others who understand. And if this touched you, please like, share, and subscribe. There's more to come, and I'd love for you to be part of it.